Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So let me tell you about Dr. Ashish Taneja, my very close friend. We are batchmates from Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi. Subsequently, Ashish got ranked 12th in PGI Chandigarh entrance exam, chose orthopedics, has been trained internationally, traveling amongst many countries to improve on his knowledge and skills, finally settled in Delhi now, and his concepts are very, very clear. And I am sure that you will have great time learning with Dr. Ashish and Professor Hiko Gretchen sir for next 90 minutes. And on next Saturday, that is 21st August, we have a lecture of anterior knee pain after knee arthroplasty by Professor Gretchen sir. Don't miss that out. Over to you, Dr. Ashish and Professor Gretchen sir. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind words. Let me share my screen quickly. Hi, students. Today we are going to discuss about OSCE in arthroplasty. I'm going to tell you about the possible questions that may be asked and what can be the model answers. So let's start. So in this first slide, what you can see, the examiner may ask you, what does this image show? What structure is required to be intact for planning this surgery? Give one advantage of this procedure over HTO. What are the contraindications of this procedure? And what are the prerequisites before counseling the patient for such a surgery? So let's go to the answers one by one. So this image shows a post-op X-ray of unicompartmental knee arthroplasty. And the structure that is required to be intact for this surgery is ACL. So in this case, ACL has to be intact before you think of doing a unicompartmental knee arthroplasty. It is mainly used for medial compartmental osteoarthritis, and there is an overlap of patient population which can undergo either HTO or UKA. The advantage of UKA over HTO will be immediate pain relief and early weight bearing. Then, what are the contraindications of the procedure? The absolute contraindications of UKA will be tricompartmental disease, ACL deficient knee, and a posterior wear seen on lateral X-ray. If the varus and flexion deformity is more than 15 degrees, or if there is a component of inflammatory arthritis, which could be rheumatoid, gout, or other general arthritic conditions. So these are absolute contraindications for UKA. Also, there are some relative contraindications, which may be a high BMI or patients who have severe osteoporosis. In that case, there may be a risk of tibial plate subsidence. Then, what are the prerequisites for this surgery? The one and only prerequisite for this surgery will be an isolated medial compartmental or a lateral compartmental arthritis. If that is present, then you can offer this surgery to the patient. So let's go to the next question. The second question shows an X-ray, and the examiner may ask which X-rays you may want to perform before planning for this surgery. The second question could be how which cuts will affect the joint line, flexion gap, and extension gap. And the third question could be which of the following cuts or steps in the surgery affect the patellofemoral biomechanics. So the first question is simple. If we have to proceed for TKR, we should get the whole series of X-rays, which may include AP standing, lateral, skyline, and a scanogram. In some patients, we may also need a Rosenberg view. The second question asks us which cuts affect the joint line, flexion gap, and extension gap. So joint line is mainly affected by the distal cut. If you cut too much on a distal cut, you may elevate the joint line. Then the second question is flexion gap. The flexion gap is mainly affected by the posterior femoral cut. Also, if you change the slope too much, you may increase the flexion gap. And extension gap, it can be affected both by distal cut and tibial cut. Tibial cut can be an answer for both flexion gap and extension gap, but it should be a second answer. The first answer should be posterior femoral cut for flexion gap and distal cut for extension gap. The third question is, which steps in the surgery can affect the patellofemoral biomechanics? So patellofemoral biomechanics are mainly affected by the position of femoral component, position and size of femoral component. If we oversize femoral component, we can cause patellofemoral overload, and if we put the component in internal rotation, there can be maltracking of patella in the PF joint. Going further, the third question could be, recognize the procedure shown on the right side, and how do you decide on performing a cemented or an uncemented stem in a total hepatoplasty? The third question could be, how do you classify periprosthetic fractures of femur after THA? The answers will be, this is a hip resurfacing arthroplasty done on right side, and a standard uncemented total hepatoplasty on the left side. So to decide whether to use a cemented or uncemented stem, the choice is made depending on the femoral cortex thickness, and the classification that we have is DOR classification. For periprosthetic fracture, we classify them using Vancouver classification. This is what DOR classification is. We classify the femoral stems into three parts, A, B, and C, depending on the femoral cortex thickness. Type A has a narrow canal, okay, and very thick cortical walls. So this resembles a champagne flute canal. If you can see this, this resembles a champagne flute kind of picture. So this is a DOR type A. As you go to DOR type B, the thickness of cortex here is decreasing, okay, and DOR type C has very thin cortical walls and a very wide canal. So this is a stovepipe canal, like a cylindrical hollow canal. So this is how you classify your femoral stem for cementing or uncementing. So the next would be calcar to canal ratio. In this, you actually have a ratio between the diameter of the femoral canal at the site of isthmus divided by the diameter of femoral canal at the site of lesser trochanter. So if the ratio is less than 0.5, it is DOR A, 0.5 to 75 is DOR B, and more than 0.75 is DOR C. Okay. Going further, Vancouver classification, it is classified into three parts, A, B, and C. A, Vancouver A is mainly the fracture of GT or LT. So based on the size of the fracture fragment and displacement of the fracture fragment, we need to fix sometimes for Vancouver type A fractures as well. Vancouver type B is subclassified into three, B1, B2, B3. So this fracture is around the femoral stem. So this is the fracture here. It's around the femoral stem. Okay. And in B1, the femoral stem is fixed, well fixed, and there is a fracture around the femoral stem. In B2, there is a fracture around the femoral stem and the component is loose, but the bone stock is good. In B3, the stem is loose and the bone stock is very poor. So that is how you subclassify Vancouver type B. In B1, surgery is mostly fixation. In B2 and B3, it's revision. It is a revision THR for Vancouver B2 and B3. In Vancouver type C, the fracture is distal to the stem and it requires only fixation. Next question. Next question is, what are the components of bone cement? What are the stages of bone cement in the curing process? And give 10 conditions of use of bone cement in orthopedics. So in this case, this table should be memorized by heart by all of you, that bone cement is in two different components, the powder form and the liquid form. The powder form contains the polymer, that is PMMA, an initiator, that is benzoyl peroxide, a radio opacifier, which can be barium sulfate or zirconia, and antibiotics can also be in powder form. In the liquid form, we'll have a monomer, accelerator, and a stabilizer. So this is how all the components are divided into powder form and liquid form. The curing process is divided into 4 stages, starting with a mixing phase, followed by a sticky or a waiting phase, and C will be the working phase. Finally, will be the setting or the hardening phase. And use of bone cement can be in cemented THR, PKR, as spacers in periprosthetic joint infections, as antibiotic beads in case of infection. We can use bone cement in bone defects, especially in chronic osteomyelitis, as in masculate technique. We can also use bone cement in bone loss with open fractures. Bone cement is used for curettage and bone cementing in GCT. It's also used in kyphoplasty, vertebroplasty, in severe osteoporosis, spine fixation with pedicle screw, or in osteoporotic fracture fixation, as well as in proximal humerus. So this is how you can list the possible uses of bone cement in orthopedics. The next question is, identify this personality and give contributions in the field of orthopedics, and describe the THA implant that he used. So this personality is Sir John Stanley. He's also known as father of modern total hip replacement. He is the one who introduced the concept of low friction torque arthroplasty, in which metal head articulates with plastic socket. He also introduced use of bone cement for fixation. He also introduced high density polyethylene as a bearing surface. Other than that, he has contributed to many advances in biomaterials, surface displacement, biomechanics, operating techniques, and operative instruments. So the concept of low friction torque arthroplasty is to combine a small femoral head of size 22.225 with the biggest possible acetabular component, which is normally 40 or 43 millimeters diameter acetabular component of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. So by this sort of combination, the friction is least, so the wear will be less. He also added one more concept, in which he tends to medialize his acetabular component, and he does a trochanteric osteotomy to increase the abductor lever arm. Both these causes decrease in joint reaction forces on the hip, causing or helping in longer survivorship. Next question.